Greetings and salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to 3 Peas in a Pod, episode 257.
We made it.
We did. However, our super fans will be quick to point out, where y'all been?
That's true.
It's been a couple weeks.
But I think maybe not.
Maybe we don't have any super fans.
Yeah.
Hey, let me dream.
Okay.
That's right. I think we said on one of our last episodes, if we didn't get no more questions, there ain't going to be no
I bet somebody out there didn't believe us.
we had to show y'all.
Yeah.
We had to show you we mean business.
You know what
Show
I was
y'all.
thinking while y'all were talking about super fans? Because I don't think there are any.
No.
How much I love this chair.
You know this chair,
I
man.
haven't sat in this chair in a while. And I thought, I should take this to my office because I have a new office chair.
For those not watching, it literally is a plastic lawn chair. It's the most rinky-dink, and Ed just loves it.
I do love it. It's so much better than what I used to have to sit in this room.
We're so glad.
We're glad for
Why
you.
don't you just come in here and just sit
I
here
might.
every week, whether we do a podcast
Well,
or
you
not.
know, unless we come in here to do this, I forget that this chair is in here.
And he'll forget it when he walks out that door.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I just wanted to inform the people, which do not consist of super fans,
That's right.
that we ain't filming these if y'all don't send us
That's
questions.
right.
That's right.
So we didn't have any questions in the
Because
past
I'd
couple
just sit
weeks.
here and talk about the chair. If
You
we
would, and that's not good for anybody.
No.
But this week we have a question. So are we ready for this?
I am.
It's a deep question. In fact, it gets really intellectual at the end.
Oh, well, that's
Not
perfect.
intellectual in the question, but in the words. Whoever wrote this, you got some big words, and I applaud you for it,
There you
sir
go.
or madam.
That's
You
true.
got some big words.
And you
and,
sent this to the right people.
Sure you did. We're gonna have to tell Ed what they mean.
There you will. We get my Mississippi dictionary out.
Dumb it down.
That's right.
So here we go. Here's the question. I heard a pastor say recently that meeting Jesus was the best day of our lives, so we should always be talking about it to everyone we meet. He likened it to the way a couple talks about getting engaged and showing off the ring. I don't feel comfortable with this approach, and I do not walk around talking about Jesus all the time. Am I missing out on what I'm supposed to do, or does this insinuate the overbearing, off-putting approach that I interpret? Those are the big words, Ed.
I got all of those.
Insinuate.
I know.
Did you get them all?
I do know every
Okay.
one of those.
Off-putting, overbearing.
I've been called those
I'll
things.
Those are good words for you. I'm sure you have.
Off-putting. You're off-putting.
Yes. Putting people off all the
I'm putting
time.
off,
And overbearing.
overbearing.
So,
So it feels like the general question
yeah,
is,
what's
if
the
I-
heart of this question?
If I go around talking about Jesus all the time,
It indicates.
do I have to do that?
Uh-huh.
Or if I do it, am I somehow
Or if I
off-putting?
don't do it, does it indicate meeting him wasn't the best thing that ever happened to me?
Ooh. Yes, there's a lot in there.
So here's what I'll say. I love my wife. I remember what it was like the day we got engaged.
Mhm.
I don't know the last time I talked to anybody about it. I mean, I've been married 45 years. It's not like something I talk
Well,
about all the time.
I thought the exact same thing
Mhm.
because when, and I'm not saying it's a bad
And
analogy.
honestly, if you did, that might be pretty off-putting.
It might be off-putting.
50 years ago, sir, I just asked if you wanted a double cheeseburger.
But let me tell you, she said yes, and then I tried to talk her out of it. That was overbearing.
Yeah. I think what you guys bring up, though, is a good point because, not to say this is a bad analogy necessarily, but I don't think every analogy breaks down at some point.
Yeah,
That's right.
And
that's right.
And I think, yeah, if you did go around talking about your marriage or your wife to every person all the time with this heightened sense of excitement, pretty soon it would be obvious to the people around you that this is an act. This isn't real.
Well, for me, that's what I would think. If
Mhm.
somebody talked to me about their spouse as the greatest person they had ever met, every time I
Mhm.
saw them, I'd think, wonder what's really off in their marriage.
Exactly. But, and maybe this gets to the harder question, but if you stopped acting as if you were married to her,
Yeah, that'd be a problem.
that would be a problem.
That'd be a problem.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
Well, and if you were
Go
you
ahead.
were ever afraid to talk about her.
Yeah, if somebody
Yeah.
said, Ed, what's your wife like? Oh, well, I don't
or
know.
what's your
Won't
marriage
talk.
like,
Yeah.
or how,
Mhm.
all of that.
Exactly.
We
Or
have-
if you said, "What did you do this weekend?" And your answer was actually, "Well, me and my wife went on a trip this weekend," and you said, "I went out of town." And they said, "Oh, with who? I don't want to talk about it."
Yeah,
I
I
don't
cut her
talk
out of
about
my
it.
stories.
So yeah, I think there's
So are we saying maybe to the answer to this question, the answer is somewhere in the middle?
Well, and you might be taking the person's analogy too far. The person was trying.
I wanted to say that. Too,
The pastor, because we all have done this.
Yes.
Often, when you're making a point to a large group, you're overemphasizing a point that you wouldn't make if you were sitting just one-to-one with a person
That's
and
right.
saying it. So
and
I want to give the pastor the benefit
I was going to
of the
say the
doubt
same thing.
because
I really want to give the pastor benefit of doubt because some of y'all don't know this. It actually is kind of tough to preach sometimes,
Yeah.
especially if I don't know about this guy, but if you got to do it a bunch, if you're the primary guy and you're doing it 52 weeks, sometimes all you got is the cheesy analogy or the thing that.
Well, that's right. And to Ed's point, I mean, part of preaching is motivational.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And to motivate people, sometimes you have to use really big images that will motivate the point or get the point across.
Yes. And so I would hate to pick apart his analogy one way or the other because I think what I hear, even in just the description you wrote of it, is the heart behind what I hear him saying is we should be excited about Jesus.
That's right.
And we should want to share Jesus with other people in the same way that someone who does, when you're first engaged, want to constantly be sharing, sharing about the news and all of that kind of stuff. I think the heart of what he's saying is fairly accurate.
I agree.
That there should be this desire in me that there are people in my life who don't know this person, this being that has changed my life radically. There should be this desire in me to want to introduce them to him. Now, the question seems to be about the method about how you go about that. And I would agree there are right and wrong methods or helpful and unhelpful methods.
In very much the same way that if I think it's more women than, well, I don't know. If a young lady walked in with her engagement ring into a room of ladies who she knew had been wanting to be married for some time, and she was walking around going,
Yes, and
that's a little overbearing and off-putting.
Sure. That's right.
Sure.
Well, and the heart behind that certainly isn't very kind.
No, it's not.
Right.
It's not kind at all. So I do think there's a way about, for sure, Jesus is the most important relationship I've ever established in my life. His willingness to allow me to follow him and the grace he has shown me through the years is the most life-changing experience that I've ever had. And I do want everyone to know about that, but I have to be careful in our world how I make that known to people. And I don't mean because they might do something to me, but because it may not be conveyed in a way that would be attractive to them.
Well, I think that's true in any world because, I mean, whatever we do on behalf of Jesus, in the name of Jesus, should be done in the way of Jesus.
That's right.
And what you described with that analogy of the engaged girl with the ring, or the excitement level or whatever, it can be done in a way that does not reflect the heart of who Jesus is,
That's
which,
right.
if I'm truly following him, is my desire to do. To do things in his way. And so, whether it comes, and you got your other extreme where some people think that the way to present Jesus to people is to be convicting or to convict them of sin. I think of the people that we've had in our community before stand on street corners and yell about the sins in the world and to call out people for the things they're doing wrong. And their intention is to share Jesus.
Yes.
That's what they're trying to do. But, in my view, that's not the Jesus way. And
that's right.
It's not how he went about doing it either. But so I think what you're trying to get at by asking the question is how do I go about doing that?
And it is a careful balance, because then there are people on the other hand that they are very committed to Jesus, yet they really don't want to ever have to bring his name up. They want to live in the way he tells them around other people. And the thought is, and I've heard this all my life, actually, before I was a Christian and my parents would make me go to church, I'd hear people say, I just want my light to shine. And then I'll be ready to answer when somebody asks me. The only problem is most people don't ask you. And
Mhm.
if they have a thought about you, they generally think, boy, that's a really good person.
That's right.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And the thought that we should not want to have happen is, I'm a really good person.
Yes.
Because
Mhm.
I know the truth.
Yeah.
One, I'm not that great a person, but Jesus is a great person.
Mhm.
And following his way has had some of his goodness show up in my life
Yeah.
Mhm.
through his power and his work.
Mhm.
So occasionally I'm going to have to, not, and in ways that are appropriate, I'm going to have to give him credit for the work that is happening in my life, even at the chance of saying to people
Mhm.
something that might, a moment,
Mhm.
cause him to pause and have a new thought about me and about him.
Well, and I think
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
I think it becomes rather critical that we find ways. Let me change my approach on saying this. I think it becomes critical that Jesus actually is really important to me and to my own life. And I think it begins to leak out more than we know it does, rather than finding really good ways to share a message and win people over in their beliefs or even their behaviors. I want them to come to church, or I want them to whatever. I think, so I think about this a lot. This was, you have those moments where you suddenly realize, I've been a dad for a while, but you suddenly realize, in my kid's mind, I'm just a dad.
Yeah.
In your mind, I'm like, oh, I'm a lot of things. And I was cool. I tell them all the time, I was cool at one point.
Thought I was.
I thought I was
Thought
cool
I
at one
was.
point, and I have all these other things. And when it kind of becomes clear. And so my kids love the TV show The Simpsons. And I asked them at one point, what character, because they were saying who's what character. And their character for me was Ned Flanders.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
And I said, in what way? And they said, well, you're constantly talking about Jesus. In fact, one of my girls said the other day, they said something, and they said, what should happen here? And they go, and I already know what Jesus is going to have a thing to say, but what else might I, And so,
what are my other options?
What are my other options was basically what she was asking. And I said to my wife at one point, I said, have I become, because, when I hear Ned Flanders, I think overbearing, off-putting, because that's the nature of that character. That's not how my girls necessarily, and that's what my wife said, I think Jesus your only reason, not to say I'm perfect and I do everything right. She goes, but when you think of what's a reason to do something, your first thought is, what is the way Jesus would have me do this? And when I explain that to my girls, for the sake of it not coming across as, well, I'm a really wise person, or I'm a really good person, or I'm a really smart person, I frequently say to them, now, I don't always get this right, but here's what Jesus would have us say. And because I've chosen to follow Jesus, I don't get to have a second opinion. I get to say, this is his thing. So for all of that. Now, that's obviously different when it's your children and, the nature of parents and children. Even at my kids' age, I got a lot of preteens and teens now of even giving advice. That's not my relationship with the guy at the gym. So it's a different nature, but.
Well, and your kids have limited cultural Christian references beyond people they know personally at church.
Right.
And you asked them specifically a character in the...
Yeah.
Ned is certainly better than almost every other character in that show.
No, that's true too.
They could have called you Homer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Or Moe.
Well, that's what I was looking forward to. I was like, well, at least Homer's kind of
Or
fun.
Barney.
Or Barney.
I'm the drunk guy.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring that up is I have become... This has been a thought that has been on my mind for a while, especially with teaching youth ministry for so long. And then a lot of what I've done the last 5 or 6 years around here has been trying to help people in what is becoming an increasingly post-Christian world. And what I mean is, I should say our country. And Georgia's behind the rest of the nation on that. But quickly, a lot of and the younger you are, so when I was more... Let me say, the less of a reference you have to anything Christian. You only know Ned Flanders, or you only know things you see in TV. You didn't go to church a lot. And so trying to help younger people understand, how do I do this with my friends? Because inviting them to church is almost always a no-go. Not because they're angry about it or they're opposed to it. They might come one time, but they're not getting hooked. So how do I do this? And what has become more convicting to me lately around this has been in my own life, our own level of what the scriptures would call holiness. And what they mean is set apart, or as recently Steve, who's a pastor on our staff, shared a quote with me, and in it, it said, the real definition of holiness is that it's uncommon. Mm-hmm. It's not common. And how much of, even in our Christianity, what we do is we create a very common Christianity. We're like everyone else. We watch all the same things. We do all the same things. We talk all the same ways. But I've got this belief set that's different than everyone else. And this idea that maybe there needs to be something radically different, to the way Jason said, of the way I treat people, the Jesus way, the way I think about things. And even this idea that everything that I do comes from Jesus.
Well, and there is a thing, that uncommonness, that I think, because there's been a lot of, as we become a more diverse nation, and there are other religious references for people in our world, more than at any time in my time of being a Christian in the United States, people know really good Muslim people.
Right.
There's a guy that's a part of our church, and his neighbor is Muslim, and he's a single older man. That's who invites him for Thanksgiving meal, is the Muslim couple.
That's wonderful.
And so, and they're Hindu people that are really good people, and people know that. So even the thought of, I'm going to be different in the way I treat people, treating people well, loving everyone, is not as uncommon among people who have a spiritual basis as Christians would like to think that it is. So we have to consistently, some of our uncommonness will be things like, Jesus gives me the ability to do for people who would never do for me.
Right.
It gives me the ability to forgive people that no one, including myself, would ever expect me to forgive. That I am willing to be open to love and help people. It is by far the most uncommon, set apart, because even other religions don't only not teach that, they often teach that it is damaging. And certainly lots of good counseling in our world would be that it's not always the best of idea. But Jesus has pushed us to be like our Father, who makes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust, and the sun to shine on the just and the unjust. And it doesn't mean that everyone is reconciled, because even with God, reconciliation didn't just require Jesus dying on the cross. It requires me deciding to meet him at the cross.
That's right.
I have to decide to turn toward him. So God no longer counts sin against him. He is no longer operating on the basis of sin with anyone in the world. But he is not reconciled to every person in the world, because not everyone will meet him at the place of reconciliation. And I can love somebody and forgive them and treat them well as he does, without them ever meeting me at the place of reconciliation.
That's true. So,
and that may be in our current culture. There are probably other things.
Well, I think what you're talking about, Ed, is the distinction, when you get down to it, of what does make us as Christians stand out in contrast to the culture that we live in, and what is the defining difference that we believe, as people see it, they will then see Jesus. We will image him in the world, and it does come down to the cross. That is the dividing line, not just of history, but of all other approaches to life, faiths, religions, all that stuff. And it's what you just described really well. It's that love of enemy, suffering for those who, for righteousness, suffering, being persecuted for righteousness, those kinds of elements. That's the unique contrast.
And it
Jesus
has
presents.
always been.
Always.
Always.
And always
when
will
you
be.
notice the history of Christianity, it's that I will die for you when you would be the one to kill me. I will give myself. It is what we're about to teach, the way of the cross. It is the call of the cross to us. And I guess I, like lots of other, I haven't had that always in my mind, but it is crystal clear in my mind that the real distinctive of Christianity is I give myself up. I die to myself a little bit, that when I die physically, hopefully I have allowed Jesus to kill most of me, but the parts of me that are unholy, that were common, so that I can be the person he wanted me to be.
Yeah.
I think it takes a while.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a slow dyer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I think getting to a place, and this is not where this question necessarily went, but I think it's a part of it that I think.
Have we ever had a question where we stayed on track?
No. But I think it's a natural part. And so my thoughts aren't really fully formed on this. So it may take me a minute to get it. But, Jesus frequently says that the world will hate you because it hated me. And I hear and this is not in your question, so this is not saying anything you said in your question was wrong, but there is an assumption that is behind a lot of our just natural beliefs, that is, there should be a winsome way to talk about Jesus and his kingdom. And that's the only appropriate way to talk about Jesus and his kingdom, is one that people look at and go, that's, everyone will want it. And this is not to throw off anyone else's thing, but the good news is good news for anyone, but it does not always sound good to everyone.
That's right.
It won't.
Herod did not think it was good news. Many of the Pharisees did not think it was good news.
Well, even people that stood right before Jesus,
The crowds didn't always think it was good
and
news.
came to him to want to find eternal life, and he would say, "Leave everything and follow me."
Yes.
That was not good news. Let the dead bury the dead. You come follow me. Not good news.
And unfortunately, what has happened is Christians have taken the parts about where Jesus says they'll hate me. They'll hate you because they hated me first. And they've said, well, anytime the world hates me, that must mean I look like Jesus. And
They might hate you because you're a jerk.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's exactly right.
And I think using this rubric of the cross, of that's my measuring stick, is, do they hate me because I look too much like the cross? Do they hate me because I look too much like Jesus? Or do they hate me because I'm doing things in the name of Jesus? Right? So there's all of that, and we've talked about that. But I do think there is a thing in many of us, and the reason that we get nervous about whether you call it evangelism or whether you call it sharing Jesus with other people, there's this fear of, I don't want people to think less of me. And I don't want to do it in a way, which is good. I don't want to do it in a way that pushes people away from Jesus, but I could do it in the way of Jesus. And by accurately conveying what the gospel is and what his kingdom is like and what it requires to be a part of his kingdom. And people hear that and they say, that's offensive to me.
Yeah.
That upsets me.
Well, that's what Paul said. He said it is a stumbling block to those who are
Yes.
perishing.
That's
Yes.
right.
And what that means is, I think about the example of the thieves on the cross or on either side of Jesus. He looked at Jesus and saw the way of the cross and said, why don't you come down and do it differently? Because for him to live in a world where, suffering love for enemies is the way to go.
Yeah.
It is the way to victory, was offensive to him. He didn't want that.
Right.
That's right.
And so he said, you need to do this a different way. And that's what that's what you're talking about, Nathan,
Mhm,
is
mhm.
that's when the cross becomes offensive to others. And it's why Herod and
That's
the
right.
Pharisees and those in power looked at Jesus's way and said, if that's the way you're going, this offends us because it threatens our kingdom.
Yeah.
And even the idea, I think, that we have of, and once again, these are in my head, and these are things I've even said before and like taught students
Mhm.
before of like, when people know that you're a Christian, they should be so excited because you're going to make their life better, all these things. And then I started
They might.
thinking, your neighbors may not be happy to have a Christian next door, because if you really started saying, hey, I'm gonna do for the homeless what Jesus
Yeah.
also caused me to do.
Mhm.
I mean, I just know we've just even had this here. In our county, the struggle to do what might be proper for to house homeless people, your neighbors may look at a church trying to say, hey, we want this to happen, and
Mhm.
say, you're ruining our property values.
Yep.
And it is bad news that this church is
That's right.
nearby.
Well, in our county, there is no place anymore that property values allow for any kind of development of the homeless. That's the honest
Right.
truth.
And that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And if a church really
They-
said, we're going to make
Mhm.
this a thing because this is what Jesus told us to do,
Yep.
or we're going to go after this, or if we said, we're going to be merciful to the kind of people and pick either political side that you don't like
Mhm.
or someone's crime that they've committed, and we say, we're going to be a merciful place for those people to find family and to find restoration. Other people may look and go, you're actually doing a wicked thing.
Well, yeah, it's what the churches in our country now that are choosing to house immigrants.
Okay,
Right.
good. Yeah, that's a good
That's
example.
a perfect
Yeah.
example of that. And there's a segment of our population that does not find that to be good
No,
news,
that's right.
although it's good news for the immigrant.
Well,
Sure.
it's
And so you have to look and
So
say,
yeah,
and that's why the kingdom has to be bigger than just the moment I met Jesus.
Mhm.
To use the statement of the thing, and I get the idea of like, because once again, that's because when the first thing I heard when the statement was, and not to pick apart the analogy, we already said that, but when this person said the moment you met Jesus should be the greatest day of your life, that is probably true for many people who have very dramatic conversion moments where I felt like God didn't love me and God wasn't interested in my life, where I'd blown up my life and suddenly I saw Jesus can save me from this, and that is not my story. I don't remember when I met Jesus.
it's also not the story for people who met Jesus and because of their choosing Him, there were people in their life that they loved that did not find that to
That's
be
right.
a
Right.
good thing. And what Jesus said came true. There's times when He causes not peace between people, but
Yeah,
a
sword.
division,
Yeah,
a sword, a division. So for those people choosing Jesus, yes, I can agree with you. Was the greatest thing they could have ever done because He is the way, He is the truth, and the life.
Yes.
But for their outward relational world, or maybe even their financial world,
That's right.
it was not
Yes.
good news for that.
Mhm.
That's right.
So
And that's
Yeah.
my point in bringing it up is I totally agree with the heart of the question of I don't want to be overbearing.
Mm-mm.
I agree.
that's right.
The off-putting part was the only part that I kind of hold on is I also don't want to be off-putting for the wrong reasons.
That's right.
But there may be times. One of my daughters says to me, at one point, she just said, "It must be really hard for you to be a pastor." I said, "I love being a pastor. It's one of the greatest joys in my life." And she said, "Yeah, but I know there are a lot of people who get upset about stuff that you say." And I said, it has never been hard for me when a person gets upset about something Jesus says. I
That's
said,
right.
I have had times where I have said things
Mhm.
that Jesus did not say, and it hurt someone or it wronged somebody. Those I feel tremendous amounts of guilt over. But it is, and I said this to I think I said to my wife the other day, I said, once it becomes clear to me, and I don't mean this as some like great sign of faith. I'm like, once it becomes clear to me, this is what Jesus says, or this is what the kingdom is. And I probably because of people who invested in me when I was young, and I just truly believed them when they said Jesus is right about everything. And I know someone's not going to want me to say this, and I know this is not, but this looks and smells and feels so much like Jesus. It doesn't, even if it's off-putting to someone and it makes them think less of me in some way, that doesn't strike me as I don't want to say scary because it's always scary to say things people don't like.
Well, I'll say this. I've been in this situation a long time where I've had to make decisions that are unpopular. And that had personal consequences. It's never been hard. I shouldn't say that. It has often been exceptionally clear what the right choice Jesus will want me to make. And I haven't debated a lot about that, to be honest. The personal consequences around it have often caused me a great deal of anxiety, and but have drawn me closer to Him to say, "Hey, I'm going to do what you want me to do, and the consequences around that, I know you'll walk with me through." And I've learned a lot about myself. Early on in ministry, I learned, oh, you really would like to do the right thing and have everybody love you for doing it. And what you find out is those often don't match up. And then I realized I also wanted to do the right thing and always get the results that I thought were the right results out of it. And that isn't the way to do it. My job is just to do the right thing and to walk with Jesus through whatever comes after that, trusting that He is at work for my good and everyone involved and His glory. But we prayed a prayer today and on mission together of all things come through patience was the basic, or patience
obtains all things.
Obtains all things. We don't like that part.
That's right.
We, I mean me, myself, and I. That we right there.
Yeah.
I want to obtain all things the moment I do the right thing.
But back to what you were saying, Nathan, I thought of this too. You talked about sometimes the gospel is attractive to people. Sometimes it's not good news for everyone, even if it's still the good news.
That's right.
I think that's why it's so important as Christ followers that we continuously spend a lot of time with Jesus so that I can make the distinction that you just talked about of, am I being off-putting, quote unquote, because of something that who Jesus is or what He said, or is it me? And that's where that comes into play, because if I am sitting with Jesus, spending time with Him, allowing Him to shape and form me, then I'm going to be able to recognize that and correct that on the fly and get better at correcting that, because you're going to do that. You're going to mess up. There have been times when I spoke the good news or the message to people, and I did it in a way that was not of Jesus. And Jesus, in His way, chastises me and corrects me and puts me back on His path. That's why it's so important that I never lose connection to the vine, so that I can always be being shaped in that way, so that I can be off-putting for the right reasons.
Well, and because you and I have been in a relationship for a long time, I know this, you mean this, and I don't want anybody to miss this. Connection to the vine does not just mean your personal relationship with Jesus. The body of Christ, it has been vital to me through my whole time of walking with Jesus that there have been people around me that loved me and would say to me, hey, you probably could have said that better or different. You could have handled that. Or are you sure that your motivation? And they've been kind about it. And they walked with me through it, and they haven't condemned me for it. But because I have stayed in relationship, the refining that people say iron sharpens iron. Yeah, but you got to get close to people regularly. There got to be some,
and there's heat.
There's some heat,
friction,
and you're not going to like it. And it has to happen regularly, and there's a price to be paid because there are rough edges being knocked off.
And I think all of that comes back to the thing we said earlier about it's not just a message that you have to get out to people. It really is this call towards holiness and being uncommon, because the goal of holiness is, Christ says, be holy as He is holy, right? That's what Peter says, is that that God calls us to be holy as He is holy, which means to be uncommon in the way He's uncommon. Be set apart to be like Him. And I think, as Jason just said, the closer I go, my goal in spreading the gospel is that that the heart behind what this guy said, I become so excited about Jesus, and I become so in love with Jesus, and He becomes the most important thing to me. that it's not unnatural for me to share about him.
Mm-hmm.
Like people always joke about to me about younger people, as I did when I would listen to you guys speak and I didn't have kids, and they're like, hey, you always bringing up your kids and all this stuff, because they matter so much to me. And I'm daily interacting with them. I mean, I have so many stories because right now in my life, that's the primary thing I'm doing is I come to work and then I go home and I'm with these kids. So if that were how I was with Jesus, that I'm constantly interacting, I'm constantly learning something from him, he's constantly shaping me, it would bleed out in more natural ways.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, we went on a long time because
We
nobody
did.
had asked us a question
We
for a while.
we had a little time to make up, so forgive us.
Thank you
That's
for
right.
the question. We
Yeah,
hope we got
absolutely.
something as an answer.
So as we sit here recording this episode, we do not have another question.
That's
so
right.
If you want to get in line, jump on in.
Now's the
and
time.
Send us a question. Click on the link in the description, and we'll be back when we come back, whenever this next question comes in.
That's right.
All right. So we'll see you then, whenever that is. Bye-bye.